Ooh,
This
no
is
pressure.
really, yeah, this is really, what, you saw the live streaming on
Yeah.
YouTube on them? Yeah, so.
Are you guys live on YouTube?
Yeah.
Nobody has the URL, so it's cool. We're just kind of keeping it for posterity, so we can share it easily with the YouTube link.
Oh.
Because I mean, we're discovering that it's preferred over. Let me mute this. It's preferred over Facebook Live because not everybody's on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I don't have Facebook.
yeah,
Everything
so
is
it's
Facebook
easier to do it on YouTube and share a YouTube link than a Facebook thing.
We mostly stay on YouTube. We watch a lot of stuff on YouTube.
Yeah. So it's just kind of easier that way. Let me get sorted out here, and then we can get to it.
I love that you have your wedding pictures behind you. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Wonderful. YouTube is reminding me to abide by the community guidelines.
Abide.
So do we all agree to abide by our community guidelines?
Abide.
Awesome. Perfect. I need an audible confirmation that we're not going to do anything that's going to get us all in trouble with Dr. Google. Okay, we ready? Ready?
Yep.
Perfect. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Paul. How's it going?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Can't complain.
Good. Yeah, we were just talking about how this is the third time this week that you and I have had the opportunity to have a conversation.
Such a treat.
It's amazing. Yeah. Just to introduce Ms. Jessica Randall, and with titles and honorifics and things like that, I won't get them right, so I'll give her an opportunity here in a second to describe and tell about all the things that she is all the different things that you've done since then. But Jessica Randall was a student at Nova in honors courses. Was that 2010? 2011 or something? Because I was looking it up when it was, and it's like, my God, that was a long time ago. Yeah. It was a long time ago. It seems like only yesterday, but only because I think we've kept in touch with each other. Sort of. We're better now than we were.
Here you go.
And Jessica has been kind enough to keep me informed along the way with her trajectory in terms of where she's going, and she's going here, and then she's doing this other great thing, and then she's going to this other cool place. And Ms. Randall has racked up quite a list, right, of cool, degrees, certifications, and positions that you've had, I think. And that was an honors biology 102 you were in when I taught it, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, if I remember correctly, the class was split into two different classrooms. So like on Monday, like on Tuesday, we met in one room, and then on Thursday we met in a different. I was thinking back on that, and it's like, I remember there was something weird about that class, because it was also taught by Art Schuhart, wasn't it?
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah, it was a co-taught English 112 Bio 102.
Mm-hmm.
At Annandale. So I will stop talking for a minute and let Jessica introduce herself and say hi, and tell us what you're doing now, right? In the Vegas sense, and where you are. She's not in the Commonwealth of Virginia, by the way, and your path on how you got to where you are.
Great. Thanks, Paul, for that intro. That's great.
Sure.
No, it's been really such a pleasure keeping in touch with you over the time since I've been at Nova, and it's wild. It's been that long. I think you forgot just one little part, though, is that you're going to be our officiant at the wedding of an honors couple.
Oh, maybe. That might be true. That may be true. Yeah. No, that's true. I'm being coy. Yeah, absolutely.
So Paul facilitated the most nicest community that I found is my fiance. So that's pretty cool, and we're really glad that you're going to participate in that and be part of that with us. Continue to be on that journey.
So if anybody watching needs to find a spouse or anything like that, just let me know. Right, we can facilitate that. We can facilitate personal relationships as well.
But so academically, professionally, I've been working since Nova. I went to George Mason for a year. I graduated in 2014. And while I was a senior there, I applied for the Peace Corps and was kind of just hanging out, doing my medical evaluation, because the medical evaluation takes about a year. So I was here in the States until 2015 and left to go work in the Republic of Moldova. which is between Ukraine and Romania, for 2 years.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. I learned Romanian and a good handful of Russian. So I'd say my Romanian skills are probably not as up to scratch as they once were, but I'd say I was pretty good at it. I love learning a language, and it was a really good learning experience in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, during my last year of service there, I applied for a Master's of Public Health program at Emory. Thankfully got in. I applied for that in Atlanta here, where Michael was working, my aforementioned fiance. And so we moved in together and started working. I started working on stuff at Emory at my Master's in Public Health, and worked at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, for the 2 years that I was a student. Completed my thesis in May of 2019, so just this past May, and started working at Emory as a biostatistician in June. And since then, I've been working on genomic and genomic analysis for kind of different omics data. So not just genomic, but I think they call it also transcriptomic, proteomic, metagenomic project, all the omics projects. That's kind of what we do. And so I've been a lot of learning on the fly and a lot of teaching myself things. And I've been lucky enough to work on some really cool projects with other groups as well. So
that's very cool. What was the title of your thesis? If you can just let it rip out there. And
yeah. So it was the seroconversion rate for the analysis of trachoma. I have to pull it up. I don't remember.
I never remember our titles. Like, I don't remember what the title of mine was either, but it's fancy, you know.
Yeah. We designed a metric to assess the rate of conversion when children who tested positive for trachoma antibodies would be becoming positive for trachoma disease. And so we designed this metric to assess that in the light of like seroprevalence being really low and hoping that it will be low. How do you test for things looking like, how do you minimize false positives, essentially?
Which is important as we investigate the positives with COVID-19 and coronavirus. Are they real positives or are they false? You know, because none of that sounds particularly interesting on the daily, but then when a pandemic breaks out, it's super important. You know, that is actually the most important thing we need to know right now is, are the positives real positives and are the negatives real negatives? You know, if you take a stats or a science class, the type 1 and the type 2 errors, you know, that we have on is a are you accepting things you shouldn't, or are you denying things you should? And that's the underpinning of modern epidemiology, I think, you know, is how much of it is out there that you can reliably know.
And as in the case of my thesis, where as seroprevalence decreased in the population, we saw more and more false positives, and it became less cost effective to send out a clinical team to do the research. So it would make more sense to have some sort of metric that could assess that for us from blood, rather than having to send out individual clinicians to diagnose, because that's just going to be a waste of time. And
you're not going to learn anything that's useful.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to learn anything that's useful.
And with COVID-19 right now, we have problems with, like, the most concern we have is for false negatives, right? And so we have more sensitivity. To your point, type 1 error would be very low.
Yeah. It comes at a point where if you can statistically describe the false positive and the false negative, you sometimes can get a better estimate extrapolating from the good data you have than in collecting more data that you don't know the quality of. Yeah. You know, you can collect a lot more data, but that might bring down the overall quality of the whole set of data that you have, and you might come up with something that looks good in terms of having a lot more data available to you, but the margin of error starts getting really, really wide, right, on what you actually sort of really know in terms of what you can actually act on. So we talk about stats now, you and I. Right?
We do. The funniest thing, I remember when I got this job, I was like, oh man, I remember sitting in your office and going, I hate this math class. I don't want to take this. He's like, you got to take this math class. It's like 150 something or 170 class.
Yeah.
I don't want to take this. This is annoying. And it was annoying. But
It is. That's not to say that it wasn't annoying.
Oh,
It absolutely was.
yeah. But I got through it and it was fine and it didn't matter. I still work as a statistician and I'm pretty good at it, I think. So.
Yeah, it turns out sometimes those classes are a little bit useful in the long run. They can turn into jobs and things like that as you go. So you're at Emory. You're at Emory now,
Mhm.
right? And what is your title at Emory? You are because when I sent the thing out, when I sent the link out with your information, there was this list of letters at the end of your name, and one of them was the MPH. I know what that one is, right? That is the
Master's in Public Health.
And you got that from
Emory.
Emory, cool. And there were some other letters as well, and I don't know what those were. What were those other?
Oh, so I think maybe from my other account for the Return Peace Corps volunteer, that can help in sending emails to CDC or government folks. They recognize that one a little more clearly. Just handy.
It is handy.
Someone else who's like, oh, I know what that means. Then it opens up a conversation, and so it's great to have that point of connection with a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. So you, as a biostatistician, right, at Emory, you're working with some of the research teams there, presumably doing things like biostatistics.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, I'm good so far.
Nailed it. Yeah.
So can you sort of walk us through the day? So on the average, and we'll do this twice. We'll do this twice, right? We'll walk us through the day pre March 12th, right? And we'll walk us through the day post March 12th, or that might be a day like yesterday. So previously, right, before what I've been referring to as all of this,
in the before times.
Yeah, the before times. Yeah. I mean, when we were kids, this was a different way. When we were all kids a couple of weeks ago, is what it seemed like. Walk us through. So what was your day? What was your day like?
I got up at 5:30 because I live 45 minutes or so from campus. And so I get up really, really early, which it's actually been really nice to sleep in a little bit. So I get up at 5:30 to go in. I'm usually, we hang out in the office for a few hours, do some data cleaning or some working on projects that may be going on. And I'll get into more of that as we walk you through a typical client meeting. So say we had a client meeting that day. Our clients are research PIs, and so they'll typically principal investigators. They'll come in and say, I have an idea for a project, and I want to do this, this, and this. With typically, we work on RNA sequencing projects or microbiome projects primarily, but we also can do some proteomic stuff. And they'll come in and say, I want to do this type of project, and how many samples do I need, and how much does it cost? And I want some nice looking graphs too. And so we'll take into account all of their clinical expertise, all of their really interesting questions, and we'll try to make it so that all of their needs are being met while also ensuring that the experimental design is sound. And so I work on a team with my supervisor, our bioinformatician, and myself. And so we meet with the client, we advise them on like, to what depth would you like to sequence, or like how many samples do you need for this, or can you control for certain variables of interest? And so we kind of discuss those sorts of things.
And how many projects do you typically work on at once? So is it
Depending
kind
on
of
the
one at a
size,
time, or do they come in pretty?
it depends on the size, but there's usually it depends on the number of comparisons that a client would like to make. And so typically a two-group comparison, just control group and experimental group, that's we can take on 4 or 5 of those at a time. Or we would have, one time I had a project that was 40 comparisons, and so that was one project at a time. It was a lot. So it can vary, but the simplest, it can be a maximum of maybe 4 or 5 at a time, and then that ensures the quality of the work being done.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So I start all my questions with "so," right? And it's like, I need to come up with a different way to start my questions. But so when I presume that folks at Emory, and we talked before we went live with this, we realized that you're only able to speak to some things that you can speak to, and maybe not other things. If you weren't interesting now, you before, you certainly are now when you say things like that. Surely Emory started to anticipate in earlier on, before March, that something was going on, and people started to think about, there's this virus coming out, right? That's looks pretty interesting. And so I don't ask you an uneasy question about the internal workings of things. When do you think it started to become known in the United States and research teams that this was a thing that maybe we look at, like in general, not anything specific, but when did it start really get on the radar of epidemiology, do you think?
So I'm sort of a little bit one degree away from an epidemiologist right now, and so I'm not as tuned in as I might have been a year ago to that kind of work. Specifically with my team, we didn't start thinking about it really until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it didn't really seem like it would be affecting us until 2 or 3 weeks ago. But that was when we sort of got the do as much as you can from home, kind of nothing sort of concrete, but sort of like, don't come in if you don't have to. And we already don't. Like, we're really, really fortunate in that a lot of our work, we don't typically need to be in the office just to be in the office. And our supervisor, thankfully, doesn't encourage that. He's like, I need seats. So a lot of our work can be done online, and he lets us. So it's really great. But there weren't, I don't think I had a whole lot of advance notice. I chatted with some friends at CDC, but only casually. And we didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal. But, our last outbreak, I guess, was the H1N1. So
which was the same, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just checking on this yesterday. H1N1 is the same strain that was the Spanish flu back in 1918.
The 1918 pandemic.
Yeah, it was H1N1. And I think, I don't know if it's the first one where people were actually able to diagnose strains of things, or if it really was, if that was actually the first emergence of H1N1 was the Spanish flu back in 1918. I've heard both stories, and it's like, I'm not sure if that's really true or not. But when you get your flu shot now, it tells you what strains it is testing for, and H1N1 is often on that list, and we see H1N1, and then we hear I guess we don't hear it too much anymore. It's been a while ago, right? The Spanish flu that killed 60 million people, right? And that's it. Spanish flu was an H1N1 flu.
Yeah, the H1N1 is really interesting. I don't know if you remember from when we had the I think it was 2011, was it? The H1N1?
Is that the same as swine flu H1N1?
Yeah,
as well.
I think that was.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
So it was 2011, I think it was, or maybe it was early 2009. No, 2009. Yeah. I think that was the funny thing about that. The most interesting thing to me was that older folks actually didn't really get sick as much from that one because they had the immunity from having
back in the day,
to have been exposed to it way back in the day, and so that was cool. That was really neat from a outbreak or epidemiology.
Wow, that is really neat. Yeah, that is really neat.
Yeah. But we didn't, younger folks, like when 2009 was when I graduated high school, and we had no immunity, and so I had a lot of friends that got sick.
Yeah, that was a pretty virulent one too. I mean, that was one of those, it was easy to get, right? It seemed to be very transmittable. And the thinking is with this one, with COVID-19, it's very, I don't know what the right word is. You could probably know better than I would. It's very catchable. It's really easy to get.
Contagious?
Yeah, contagious. Yeah. It's like, contagious, I guess, is a good word to use. And I was reading an article about that, and the description is, it's like the spikes on the outside of it, that is like first contact between the virus and your cells, are much more effective than other coronavirus strains at like getting into the cell, cell. It's like, because SARS is a coronavirus, why, I mean, if you look at the actual name of this, it's, what SARS covariant 2 or whatever it is, and that's where the COVID sort of comes from. So SARS had a much higher death rate. I think, from what I was reading about it, it was like 8, 9, or 10%. It was pretty serious, if what I'm reading was, it's just like, it was a lot more deadly than COVID-19 is, but it wasn't great at actually getting into the cell, right? So it wasn't quite as contagious. But if you did get it, it was bad news. What I'm reading about COVID-19 coronavirus, the modern version of it, is that it's the death rate is about a tenth or between a fifth and a tenth of what SARS was. It's like 1%, 2%. And that's just like what I've sort of been seeing. You might know the actual.
It's hard to tell right now.
Right.
I think
Yeah, it is.
the link
This gets
always
back
said
to your master's work, right? It's hard to tell because it's like you don't know what you don't know what you don't know. In some cases, you do know what you don't know. But it seems like from what people are saying, those spike proteins are just much more effective at breaching the cell membrane and getting in. So yeah, and it's durable in the environment. Like it lasts a long time on surfaces. Compared to some other stuff, so it can last a day or two on tables and things like that. Which is why all these closing all these restaurants, and the Starbucks down the street is closed, and the Mod Pizza was takeout only, and it just seems like it lasts a long time out there.
The only time I can remember, like growing up, having this seem as intense as it is was the anthrax scare.
Yeah, that's right, because people were mailing anthrax around. Yeah, you don't want that either.
No,
you don't.
That was terrifying.
Yeah,
and it's like sense of dread that everybody was feeling at once. I don't know if this was nationwide, so maybe just me as a kid growing up with it. But in the Nova area, there was like anthrax being mailed, and it's really, really scary.
It's scary. I mean, it's scary to think about. I was talking with somebody else about this, and he mentioned that with the current generation, of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right, this might be the first big thing that is going to be a historical benchmark. So when our parents were talking about, remember the Second World War? And I'm like, no. And we say, hey, remember when Mount St. Helens erupted? And it's like, no. And I'm like, my God, I'm old. The moon landing, or JFK getting shot, or, Spanish flu, or, 1945, when, U.S. and the Allies won the Second World War, and these benchmark events in history. It's like now the Gen Z generation has a thing, right, that they're going to tell their grandkids about. It's like, I remember, because if you think about it, at the time, these things never really seemed like there's a thing that's going to be a historical footnote or a couple of pages in a textbook, like which we won't have in 50 or 100 years. But this could do it, because now all these 17, 18, 19-year-olds have this story of, hey, remember when we were in college and everybody had to hunker down and classes were online for the rest of the semester because there was this coronavirus that was out there that was going wild. This might actually be like a historical benchmark moment that people are going to be able to tell their kids about, that is going to be historically interesting and relevant.
I hope people keep diaries, because I've been thinking about this. I've been reading the food diary, or not food diaries, but like the diaries of a food delivery worker in Wuhan. And so it's been really, really interesting. And I hope that people recognize in the moment that this may be interesting down the road. So maybe it would be a good idea to keep a diary.
Yeah, somebody asked me why I'm recording everything. It's like these conversations we have about it and some other stuff is like, this isn't, and I said, well, some people, we like to send it out, and so other people can, check it out when we do it. But I'm also thinking this is historical documentation of a thing which does not happen often. So many research projects are going to come out of this. So many things are going to be learned from this. Right now it's like, this is a catastrophe. Let's solve the problem that's in front of us. But so much research is going to come out of this. It's going to be we're going to be flooded with, long and short-term effects of social isolation, a lot of sociology projects, tons of, biostatistical and bioinformatics and genome studies are going to come out of it from the virus. But like, it's going to hit from all sides, right? The historians are going to talk about it. The sociologists are going to talk about it. The psychologists are going to talk about it. I know that our administration at Nova is paying very close attention to it, just in terms of the administration. How do you keep a college open and functioning effectively when you do this? And, one of the things that people are learning is all those meetings that happen in person, you probably could have done them on Zoom.
Could have been an email.
It could have been an email, right? There's unfortunately, for a lot of people who are invested in meeting in person, that probably is true. It probably could be an email. It could be. It could have been a Zoom.
It could have been. I have collaborators across the country, and I love having Zoom calls. Like we had our Zoom call the other week, and it was so nice. But yeah, I don't need to go to a physical location. I feel just as connected and talking to you here. it would be great if we could meet in person, but since we can't, this is a really
Since we
this is a good
can't,
time.
this is it.
Good time to have a pandemic. I mean, we're really connected
Yeah, yeah,
as a world.
yeah, yeah. And what I'm seeing is just so much outpouring of people trying to intentionally connect with each other. Because it's
Yeah.
like, why do we feel closer now, Jessica, than we did? Because it's like, and I was kind of thinking about this when we were talking the other day. It's like we could have, but we didn't because we could easily, so we didn't. But now it's harder, so we're all doing it, and interaction is a lot more intentional now.
Yeah, it looks like
Really,
we have
you're.
a comment from Carolina, so I don't want to ignore that.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not sure
cool.
if it's a question or not. She's made a comment. We need to see faces in person to be happy. This is true. And having resident psychologist Michael Honer on hand, I could probably ask him. No, yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess people have different needs, so I'm definitely speaking just for myself here. But for a lot of work, I find it, for me personally, just being just as productive online as I am in person. In fact, more so.
Or so, yeah, because I was thinking about that too. It's like I'm getting a lot more done.
Yeah.
But why, and why is that? And it's not a thing. I think it's a couple of little things, not the least of which I'm not sitting in my car for an hour and a half a day.
Yeah, same.
So it's like the
10 hours a week not sitting in my car.
Commute is gone.
Yeah.
Right. The random interactions you have with people, which oftentimes result in increased creativity, also result in decreased productivity, right? So Nova Scotia has to decide what it wants, right? Do they want creative faculty or productive faculty, and then how do you balance that? And I have no idea how people are going to find mates now in this Zoom world, though, since we're because I mean, to Carolina's point, a big part of human interaction is like pheromonal biochemistry and kind of sort of these other things that you just don't get on Zoom.
Not a sociologist, so I have nothing to say to that.
I'm purely speculating.
Yeah, that's outside my scope. I deal with numbers.
yeah, and they don't lie, do they? They don't lie, do they?
They might.
Ooh, that's your thesis, right?
It is. I mean, this is to your point earlier, is that you mentioned some sort of like how many getting a good sample, I think is kind of what you're talking about, your enough power, or getting, like, you can have big, huge data, you can have the biggest data ever, but it doesn't mean it's good data.
Yeah.
You're adding noise. And so
yeah.
that same thing where, we have a lot of information, a lot of voices happening right now. And so it's going to be hard to parse everything that's coming out of this, but we will eventually.
We will eventually. I'm pretty confident as that. Well, and it's going to take a while, I think, to catch up with it all.
Yeah,
sure. As it all sort of comes out. You've mentioned this a couple of times. I want to talk about this just because it's super, super fascinating. You were in the Peace Corps.
Yep.
When was that? That was 13 through 15? 17, 15 through 17?
Yeah, 17.
Yeah, and you were in Moldova, and I remember that.
Yeah, I think we may have had a call then once, maybe.
I think we did. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we totally did.
Talk with Shauna, because Shauna, it was so great. They had the best time. Oh man, so so Shauna came and spoke to, or like we had a Zoom call with Shauna.
Right.
That I worked with. So I worked in a library mostly, and I worked with librarians. They had just gotten a grant from the Gates Foundation to get computers in their library, but computer literacy wasn't quite there enough to make use of this product as much as it could be. And so I taught like basic skills in Word and in Excel and in like how to clean your computer, so that, because the kids knew what to do, they would come in and download free games and the computers would basically freeze. And so I taught the librarians how to run like Malwarebytes and little programs and stuff. And so I was like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if they could chat with some people that I know back home and sort of see what people more their age, an example of a life lived in the US might look like for people more their age. And so it was really great to have Shauna come on, because they got to chat and they're like, what movie? I think they talked about Bollywood movies. It was so great.
I think it did. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Because part of that was just English literacy, right? Just, an active, I mean, to Carolina's point, in person kind of, conversation with somebody, right, in a different language.
Yeah, so they spoke Romanian, and none of the people that I worked with on a daily basis spoke Romanian. I spoke Romanian entirely for the majority of every day for 2 years, and so that was a lot of fun. I really liked it. Yeah, I primarily worked in libraries. We did end up doing a national program, so those librarians actually we worked together to. Once I taught them some stuff, they were like, "Okay, let's go to other libraries and teach." And I was like, "Great, that sounds awesome." So we got to travel around and like do our little teaching spiel. But yeah, so part of the Peace Corps goals is one, the transfer of like skills, what we might call hard skills, and the second goal is to do sort of that cultural exchange from like the culture that you're living in to the culture that you're coming from. And so the final goal would be bringing the culture that you're living in to your home, like to wherever that should be. But so back and forth, goal 2, goal 3, goals for Peace Corps. And so that was satisfying. One of those goals is that cultural exchange back and forth of like, our lives may look very different, but we also have a lot more in common. And so that was really fun.
Very cool. Yeah, because I think Peace Corps just got evacuated right out of all the places they were in. That's a shame. I don't know what they're going to do afterwards.
I follow the State Department updates from Moldova still, and they had the land border shut down, I think, a couple of days ago, and all of the U.S. diplomatic corps have been evacuated.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
So if somebody was interested in doing a Peace Corps thing, I mean, this is presuming, I mean, I'm sure this will come back, but I mean, knock on wood. How does one best prepare if they are thinking about applying to the Peace Corps? You know, what's any hints? Get A's.
Yeah. So you have to have a bachelor's or substantial life experience.
Okay.
Substantial life experience. A lot of the volunteers we had were either all of them that I knew had a bachelor's, but like for example, they also accept people who are maybe more advanced in their careers and have specific expertise. So you can do a 2-year thing like I did, or you can do a response position, which is a targeted sort of, I'm good at this country needs this, I'm gonna go do that. And that's only about a year, I think, but it has a little bit more strict requirements. Honestly, the most difficult part of it is the health exam, and that's not a lot of control in a lot of people's control.
Right.
So it's also a matter of luck. A lot of people will go through the process and get disqualified based on medical things. And it's not because that the Peace Corps is like, oh, we don't want that. It's just they can't support you in the country and they want you to do well. And so they're not going to send you somewhere that you're not going to thrive.
Yeah, and you need to be healthy where you are, right?
The first concern is for your health. It's not like, oh, we don't want this and this and this. It's like, we don't want you to get hurt. So it can feel that way. But no, so that would be, do well, kind of begin with an end in mind. So a lot of people go into service thinking they're going to find themselves. And I found that my colleagues who began service and ended service that way had the least sort of successful service. And so they came out going, I didn't really find myself, and I have 2 years I wasn't really doing anything, and I watched Netflix in my room. So you know, I went in going, I want to go to grad school. I need this to be on my resume. I need to do X, Y, Z. And this is part of my larger 5-year plan or so. And it worked out.
Yeah. I remember you had a great experience with it from front to back.
You know, challenges in any 2 years that exist in any workplace are the same abroad.
Yeah. Do you still remember Romanian? Do you have opportunity to practice or?
Oh yeah. We just watched a thing last night about Romanian witches, and I was listening to them and I was like, oh wow, they're so clear. Like, so Moldovan dialect of Romanian is slightly different than like Romanian, and so it's really great to hear the differences and be able to pick out words. And we're just watching the X-Files, and one of the characters was speaking Russian, and luckily they were speaking like formal Russian. And I was like, oh, I know that.
That's funny. Yeah, well, that's cool, because you sort of worry. It's like, oh my God, am I ever going to be in a position to interact with this Moldovan dialect of Romanian? And the answer can be yes. You know,
one of my professors actually at Emory is Romanian, and so we got to speak and we got to work on stuff. And she was just so excited to hear somebody else speak Romanian, and I was like, yeah, we're totally all the time. And so
that's very cool.
She's become a client now, and that's cool.
That is cool. So changing the subject just a little bit. You went to Nova. Mm-hmm. You went to Nova, right? And you sort of went on from there. If somebody is currently at Nova is interested in something like being a biostatistician or working in epidemiology or in the statistical way, any thoughts, any recommendations? Obviously, take stats. There's some math to it. You know,
math to it. Take probability.
When does that get serious? When does the math get serious? I mean, is it?
I sort of took a roundabout route. So I would say the math
Yeah.
linear algebra class, and get a strong foundation and build from there. It's only going to get harder.
It's like matrix function, right?
Matrix
Which
algebra,
is
yeah,
variance covariance, which is the
yep,
basis of
mhm,
regression and
regression,
modeling. And
yeah.
yeah, so that was like second 2 years undergrad, pre-bachelor's, or does it really start to hit in your graduate program, do you think?
I learned the actual skills that I'm using in grad school in the second year of grad school, but I wouldn't have been able to learn those if I hadn't had any bachelor's degree level like work. So most of my stuff at Mason, my degree program wasn't very math intensive, but just having an understanding of linear algebra was pretty helpful, and kind of knowing, all right, this is how it goes. This is what an X is. This is what a Y is. This is what a graph looks like. This is, it's important to keep that in mind. But honestly, a lot of the stuff I've had to re-examine over online courses,
Mm.
and so I use Coursera a lot. And
Oh,
there's like
cool.
4-week intensive courses. There's 8-week intensive courses on regression and machine learning and or whatever specific type of analysis that I'm doing. I just go and look it up on YouTube or Coursera and like get a crash course in it and practice and read up a lot. So I mean, a lot of it you can teach yourself, but if you have a good foundation, that's going to be a big help.
Is it that if you have a good foundation, you can teach yourself the advanced
Yeah,
stuff? Or yeah,
it's not. Yeah, yeah. Once you know like how to do a linear regression, everything else is cake.
sort of a tweak on that.
From that,
Yeah,
yeah.
very cool. Very cool. What software do you use?
So I learned SAS in graduate school, and then I learned Python for one class and really liked it, and then learned R on my own.
R serious.
Eh,
R
it's
is
less serious than Python.
less than Python.
Less serious than Python.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Interesting. Yeah.
sounds
Because
way easier.
I mean, you kind of get this notion of like, what does a statistician do? And I think there's a lot of time spent in SAS or
Programming, yeah,
yeah,
programming.
programming. Yeah, it's
You like being alone and not seeing faces every day? This job is for
job
you.
for you. Yeah.
Like, I honestly don't understand how, like, I used to work in retail and I was like, this is exhausting. I don't want to talk to people all day long. I don't know how you do it, Paul. So this is really great. I like to work alone and I get to compute and hack away at stuff all day long, and it's fabulous. So
Yeah.
that's just me. And if that is not for you, you may want to think about something else.
That's awesome, though. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But I mean, that just speaks to it. I mean, there is stuff out there, for people to do, no matter what their strengths or the weaknesses sort of are.
Yeah.
Invariably, though, one must apply oneself,
Yes.
and try to find ways for what they love to do to sort of plug into what their skills are. And scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with all of this, the way that your career has gone so far?
It's been great. And honestly, I want to say, like, I say teach myself, but honestly, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really good mentors around me to point me in the right direction, including yourself, Paul. So stick close to Paul and you'll do great. But honestly, like, I count you among the pantheon of like people that I would go to in terms of like, what do I do next? How do I go forward? And so, yeah, get good people.
Yeah, you give me more credit than I deserve, Jessica. More credit than I deserve. That's an interesting point that you raise as well. For me, that one gets the impression sometimes that once you become a professional, that means that you're an expert on something, and
Yeah.
that's not true. That's not
No.
true. That means by being a professional that you're going to come across things that are on the cutting edge of stuff, and your responsibility is to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you're gonna reach a point where you're the only one on your team that may know something, and you have to be responsible for that being accurate. So it's on you.
Yeah, it's on you. And also, it seems like you've noticed this as well, that people are also very willing to help.
Yeah, I
You
found
know,
that space, but I'm very fortunate to have found really good people, and I don't, I feel very lucky.
so you're not alone in the hey, I need to figure this thing out. I don't know what the answer is. You can take a crack at it, and it's like, say, I'm open to suggestions is a real thing
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Cool. I wonder if anybody who is here, Justin or Bryson or Carolina or Steffi has any questions or anything that they would like to ask. And if so, right, you can just unmute yourself and lay it out there if you'd like. Anybody have any questions about anything? Questions? I can keep
Hey,
going.
I came in a little late. I'm so sorry.
Hey, Bryson, how are you?
Hey, I'm wonderful. How are you, Paul, today?
Good, good.
So sorry. I came in a little late. Had to manage these classes, but I was wondering, you guys were going to talk about the different type of bacteria, or different type of the actual name. I can't remember. Like SARS #2.
Yeah, the virus
Oh,
strains.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
and I
virus.
was very curious on virus strains and how basically this virus strain seems like it just can't get a grip on any type of treatment. And I was just wondering, basically, I did a little research myself and saw that it's like based on a fat, very basic in its virusness, I guess is
Mm-hmm.
the best way to say it. But why is it so complex in the sense to treat it?
Do you want to take a crack at that, or you want me to take a crack at
I want
that?
to make sure I understand. So you're asking why it's difficult for people to treat it?
Currently, it seems like getting just trying to wane the effects of it seem to be like throwing everybody for a loop.
Mm.
And so I suppose since, these type of viruses are so common, why is this such a hard curveball?
I wish I were an MD and knew more about the biology around this disease, then I would be very much more qualified to answer your question.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really good question, though, and I wonder if it may have something to do with the way it's affecting the immune system. That's pretty vague. But sort of so we get a flu vaccine every year, as you mentioned, Paul, or typically I get a flu vaccine every year.
Yeah, I do too, yeah.
And so that has 3 strains in it. And so those 3 strains are based on the ones we see most common in certain areas, geographic areas in the United States. I think there's just the one flu vaccine that everybody gets with the 3 most common. And so they're taking their best guess. Even though we see flu every year, we still have to take our best guess because things change really quickly. And so I think maybe this one has changed in such a way that people haven't seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be that they're figuring out how it's changed, what's different about it from what we know. And that's kind of taking a bit of time right now. And once we figure that out, I think it'll be quick goings. But right now we're just trying to figure out how it's different from what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something about evolution too. I mean, we adapt, and as education, as we get cleaner, as everything like viruses and bacteria have to mutate too. That's what we're scared of, right? That antibiotics are going to stop working on bacteria because they're going to mutate enough, so we wouldn't have cure for them. So I don't know. There's so many different ways the flu and different kinds of flu affect people that to some extent they might mutate too.
Yeah. And that speaks to how bacteria and viruses are treated differently as well. The antibiotics do a really decent job, or at least they used to, against bacteria. They don't do much with viruses, because they're inside the cell. And so viral therapy, like a flu shot, or a viral preventative or something like that, is about tweaking your immune system to be able to contend with it once you get it and once you're exposed to it. Whereas antibiotics are, hitting the thing itself, and a weakness in the organism itself. And because Jessica, if I remember right, when this originally came out, they were calling it the novel coronavirus.
So I guess it was novel
because it's new. Yeah, it's new.
Antigenic shift or antigenic drift causing new strains. So those are kinds of things you might want to, if you're curious. I mean, Bryson, I don't know if we answered your question, but it's kind of what the thoughts that came up for me were.
Yeah, and to the testing side of it, Jessica, speaking back to your thesis on what are the false positives are there, and how many negatives are out there that we're thinking are positive, and vice versa. As we identify more people who are infected with it and are showing symptoms, we're getting a better sense on what the symptoms actually are, because originally it was like the respiratory flu, but then it started to come out that some of the primary symptoms were a headache and a fever that's pretty high, but not everybody does that. And then there was some talk about a week ago that, there might be more of a gastrointestinal response than anything else. So it's like, to Bryson's point, it's like, it seems like the symptomology is just kind of hard to pin down, right?
And it plaguing. Like, you just get to add symptoms willy-nilly and it's sort of fun, but this is like, it's doing that on the fly.
Yeah, and this is the worst time, right? Well, it's never a good time, but this is one of the worst. I mean, because I have a couple of students, it's like, okay, I have a little bit of a sore throat and I have some chest congestion and I'm really sneezy, and the pollen count is through the roof.
Yeah.
You might have an allergy, you might have a head cold, you might have a norovirus, you might have, there's 9 different things I can think of that could give you similar symptoms to what you could expect that are not COVID-19, but some of them are, COVID-19. And how do you identify them? And what it is, 30,000 genes, 30,000 nucleotides. It's a retrovirus RNA based, like 18 genes. Mm-hmm. One of the genes is for the spike, that it interacts with the cell with, which clearly mutated, which is why it's so easy to get into the cells. But where it goes, where does it land? What parts of the body does it target? Once you get a handle on that, you can start developing some of these things. Yeah, but until then, you're wash your hands, don't touch your face, 6 feet.
There's such a gap between the sort of, we can figure out like genetically where the virus strain is coming from that each person is infected with, but like at the point of saying testing for it, like testing is hard enough, but then saying, okay, this test is correct and this test is sensitive enough and specific enough to like correctly get all the cases and not incorrectly get cases that aren't there, and to treat it like that's, I think it's there's a lot of what's going on right now, a lot of questions still out there, and I hope that once we figure out how it's different from what we know, then we can start getting on it. But the symptoms are very vague. So like Paul, you were saying with the headache and they're sort of vague respiratory symptoms. And if anybody's ever played Plague Inc., now might be a fun time to start. Respiratory illnesses are the easiest ones to go unnoticed because the symptoms are so vague. And
they're so vague,
And people don't know. They're like, oh, it's allergies, whatever. But if you're playing, Plague Inc. is a video game where you play as a virus and you try to kill the world before the CDC cures you or whatever. And so if you play, you know that the respiratory viruses are the fastest and easiest level or mode of play because they're just sort of generic. And so this is like the nightmare, right? And so I think this very generic disease is spreading very quickly, and it's very hard to tell how it's different from what we know.
Right. And this is not the only coronavirus out there. There are 3 or 4.
Sure. I mean,
it gives you symptoms. Yeah, that give you symptoms. That gives you symptoms of a head cold or a mild flu or something like that, or serious flu. And this is just sort of the new kid on the block that has mutated a little bit, that we've come in contact with either by bringing animals to us in a market or by encroaching on ecosystems in a way where transfer sort of takes over. But one of my students in a class that I'm teaching sort of broke up the gloom and doom a little bit by saying the canals in Venice have never been cleaner. The air in Beijing has never been, there's blue sky in Beijing. It's like because everybody's staying home and everybody's being so careful and being sequestered. It's like some ecosystems are cleaning themselves up pretty effectively. And the analogy that was brought in is like, after years of abusing the earth, it put us in detention and told us to spend some time in our room to think about what we've done while it cleans up after us a little. So it's like, the dolphins are once again in the bay around Venice, and it's
I like that framing. I'm going to keep that one on hand.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions for Jessica before we let her get on to her biostatistical day? Anybody else have anything they'd like to throw in on? Justin, Carolina, anyone? Going once?
Hey, one more.
That's a really good question.
Sure. Hey, Bryson, go ahead.
One more. So I see so many measures that different countries are taking to try to prevent spread. And recently, this morning, I saw that Italy's prime minister was like, I'm going to have to flamethrower people because they're just not following the rules. like statistically, what is the best method to just keep people inside?
The best method to keep people in their houses?
Yeah, because it seems like, a lot of countries are using martial law. Some are just being like, please. And I don't know what.
That's a political question, but I'm happy to answer it. I mean, it's not really political to me, but I think some people may disagree on the best methodology, the best policy answer. But to me, I think it all comes back to incentives. So what are you incentivizing people to do? Are you making it easy for them to stay home if they need to? Are you making it easy for them to take a sick day if they need to? Are you giving them all the ability to make a choice that's in their best interest? So if people have a job that requires them to go into a public place, so if I've been working, so I worked in retail for a few years, if I still had to keep going to work to make money, is my employer offering me incentives to stay home if I need to? And that's a choice that I think policymakers should be thinking about, to incentivize people to stay in their homes and make the right choice easy, make the healthy choice the easy choice. I don't know. I think those are really good, and those are really not a good opportunity, but it's unfortunately a high probability that there may be some masking of things going on and restricting movements of people that may be under the guise of this is for your health, when the right choice may be more along the lines of encouraging people to make the healthy choice, because people will probably make the right choice for themselves without needing course to limit their movements. But
that's a great
Thank
answer,
you. That's
Jessica.
so cool.
Yeah, it's like that was a really good
I'm
answer.
like, I want that on like a billboard, like make the healthy choice.
Yeah, that's a really good answer.
I think about incentives a lot. I like economics, and so I think about like what's incentives. What do you encourage? So public health in general is like encouraging people to behavior change broadly, and there's one area of public health that focuses more on behavior change. And so how do you get people to change their behavior? How do you get people to stop smoking? How do you get people to eat healthy, whatever it is you want them to do? How do you do it? And people have different ways of going about that. And so the one thing that I think always works is just trusting people to make the right choice for themselves. And if you make the right choice, the healthy one, they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you make the healthy choice the easy choice, then people will generally choose that one.
Yeah, and then, Jessica, however, we see a bunch of Gen Zs on the beach in Florida for spring break who are not listening or making the healthy choice. And I don't know if it's them not making the healthy choice or their parents not making the healthy choice for them, but what are you thinking, right? There was a so it's hard, but I know the cherry blossoms pretty much got shut down, so they closed all the roads around the cherry blossoms.
Bloom cam.
There's a bloom cam. Right?
I've been watching the bloom cam. I miss it so much. I've been watching, but it's so eerie. The other day, rush hour traffic was like non-existent, so it was very strange.
Yeah.
To your point, the earth is healing itself, but it was just really eerie to see no traffic on I believe that's the Key Bridge. So it was weird. It was weird. But I miss the cherry blossoms. It was so nice.
Yeah, and also at the same time, though, the price of gas hasn't been this low in years, right? So I'm thinking, because there's the China-Russia, this sort of Russian-Saudi trade war going on with the oil price right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're each one of them is trying to underbid the other one to put the other one out of business. And so like gas the other day was like $1.85 at Costco for a gallon. It's like, that is not encouraging people to stay inside if the price of gas is $1.85 a gallon. It's like, one of the ways you can encourage people to stay homebound and don't go anywhere is raise the price of gas to $35 a gallon or something like that. But you can't really do that. But, at the same time, we're all staying home and not going anywhere. We're seeing the price of gasoline just like plummet for reasons that have nothing to do with this. For reasons that have nothing to do with this. But I mean, keeping the restaurants closed, just making it's almost depressing, because the first approach is to don't give anybody a reason to go anywhere, by closing places.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you going to do? You're going to go somewhere? You don't have concert tickets. I was supposed to go to New York this weekend to see a concert. Not doing that. So it's like, all right, not doing that.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off here, but I have to get going.
We can let you go and get on with your thing. So it was wonderful, Jessica, to be with you for this hour.
It was.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carolina and Steffi and Bryson, for your good questions and for feedback and for comments. And please feel free to add me on Zoom or email contact or LinkedIn, whatever you'd like. I'm happy to chat with any of you. So please feel free. Paul has my email address if you need that too.
Yeah, I can put people in
always
touch.
happy. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.